Hi, my name's Jay Johnson. I'm here at the Royal Church. We're talking about some parables and some stories. I'd like to tie in this particular incident that comes from the Old Testament. I reference this story. It's called Stone Stories, and the idea is that everybody in their life has some story at which they hang some important event in their life and some truth that's associated with that event. And it gets this title, Stone Stories, because in Joshua, you may remember, was the understudy of Moses. Moses was the big guy that brought all the Israelites out of Israel, all the Israelites out of Egypt, brought them towards the Promised Land. But before they went into the Promised Land, God told Moses, you're not going to go to the Promised Land. You're going to die before you go there. So Joshua is going to be the one that takes the people in. So Joshua, who had been trained and sort of prepared for this responsibility for the last 40 years while they're in the desert, he comes right up to the Jordan River. And the Lord tells him, this is what you do. He said, the river's in flood stage, and it's going to be really hard to get across. Now, we remember the story when they were coming out of Egypt, they came across the Red Sea. The Red Sea parted. Remember that story? You remember that? Red Sea parted? I'm hoping you remember that. A lot of people don't know what it is, so they're going to have to call me to find out what it means. But for those of you that do know, it's where the Red Sea parts. They come out of Egypt and into the desert as they prepare their journey. Now they're coming up to the Jordan River, which is in flood stage. They have to cross the Jordan River so they can get into the Promised Land. And this is what God tells them. And this is really key. He says, I want you to pick up the Ark of the Covenant, pick it up, and as soon as the priests who are carrying the Ark of the Covenant, as soon as their foot touches the water, it says the water will stand up like in a heap. It will stand up there and will back up all the way back over the miles. It will back up there while you can cross on dry land, which is what occurs. Now, here's the important, that's a major deal, but here's the important part I'm trying to stress. Once they've crossed over the river, once the ark has stood there and all the people go across the river and they get on the other side and everybody's there, they're safe without being caught up in the flood. The Lord tells Joshua, he said, I want you to have a member from each one of the 12 tribes pick up a stone from the middle of the river, pick that stone up and carry it out, and then over here you deposit those in one place. And people say, why are those stones there? And the Lord said, because when you see these stones, you will be reminded of the wondrous things that God has done for your people. So that's what they did. They went over there, and those 12 individuals, they picked up these stones, they carried them out, they put them in a heap, and they were left there. Now, as time went by, and people would walk back and they would see that heap of stones, they would remember. They would remember. Now, this is really key for us. Of all things that we need to do, we need to remember. This is a small little comment that was made to me by my father a number of times. When my father was born on January 13th, 1912, it was 19 degrees below zero. His mother was going to have, my grandma was in labor, and they lived way out in the country. They lived about at least a half a mile off the main road. And the snow was coming down, blowing like a hoolie. It was just incredibly harsh. So my great uncle Herman, that was my grandmother's brother, he stood out there in the snow until the doctor came by. And he didn't come by till like 10 o'clock that night. So great uncle Herman was standing out there bundled up, waiting for this doctor to show up. The doctor showed up. Uncle Herman got in the buggy with him. They went up to the house. The doctor got out of the buggy. He got out of the buggy. Uncle Herman took the horse to the barn and put him up. The doctor went in. The first thing he did was he asked for something to eat. Then he went into the bedroom to attend to my grandmother. Somewhere in the early morning hours, 2, 3 in the morning on January the 13th, my dad and his twin brother were born. They were tiny. Their combined weight was 5 pounds and 1 ounce. I think my dad weighed, I'm not sure it was my dad or my Uncle Ado, one of them weighed 2 pounds and 5 ounces, and the other one weighed the rest. But they were so fragile and so tiny that the best way to keep them warm was they took a shoebox, they put them both in the shoebox, the same shoebox, and they put them in the warming oven by the stove. Well, when the doctor delivered my dad and my uncle, the next thing he did was he went out and he grabbed a blanket, he wrapped himself around with the blanket, and he crawled behind the stove and went to sleep. Here's the big point. The next morning, the doctor wrote out 2 death certificates, and he signed it. And he handed them to Grandpa, and he said, you're probably going to need these. Just fill out the data and take them in when it's time. Well, the doctor left, and the next morning he got on his buggy and he took off and went back home. They showed the death certificates that were already signed by the doctor because they were, obviously the doctor thought that these 2 young babies would die. And Grandma looked at it and she said these words, I don't think we're going to need these, because when there's life, there's hope. If I heard that story, if I heard that comment once in my life, I heard it dozens of times. And that for me was one of those stones. Those were stones of remembrance. One of those stone stories. And I say that to you because you have your stone story. There's things that you know that you will fix your memory on about what God has provided for you and your life and your future. It's an indication of the past, but it also speaks about what will happen in the future. Okay, that's my next stone story, or my second one. I'll tell you what, I'll be talking with you later, but thanks for stopping by, and see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.